This Rise and Shine podcast series has been made possible by the generosity of the Zeidelman Family Foundation, which is committed to the unity and continuity of the Jewish people through meaningful and relevant Jewish education and wisdom.
We are not commanded to believe in God. We are told to know God. So, not the blind faith for us, but rather the pursuit of truth, which is ultimately knowable.
This is Rise and Shine, a podcast that offers timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations to fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note. Here is Adrienne Gold-Davis.
In my youth, I held many different identities. I changed them like I changed my clothes, sometimes daily. And every time I found a new ism to attach myself to, it felt like I'd reached the Holy Grail. Now, in college, for a very brief time, I decided I was a communist. And my mother, in her wisdom, laughed and said to me, "You, a communist? You won't even let your sister borrow your sweater." I even remember taking ridiculous quizzes in magazines that told you who you were or who you were meant to be based on your horoscope or the way you dressed. In many ways, I guess they were a precursor to those BuzzFeed quizzes. You know, they let you know not only who your soulmate is or what color your aura is, but also which Taylor Swift era you represent, depending upon the choices of desserts you make. I spent so much time reading and examining and marching and learning and lecturing others about what I was currently invested in. Those were heady times. And you know what they say? If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I did. The point was not so much my fickle identity, but in retrospect, I think it was the yearnings of my Jewish soul. Because if there's anything that defines the Jewish nation, it's our search for truth and our passion for the repair of the world. And it's not just Jews who assert this. We see this thinking in the writings of the great American writer and historian Thomas Cahill, who passed away at 82 a couple of years ago. Born in New York City to Irish-American parents and raised in Queens and the Bronx, Cahill was educated by Jesuits, and he studied ancient Greek and Latin. In his book, The Gift of the Jews, he wrote one of the most historically accurate statements of the Jewish spiritual journey that I have ever encountered. As a people whose marching orders from God to Abraham was Lech Lecha, go to yourself or go for yourself, we understand that not only does every human being have a self to go to discover, but that one must examine closely the cultural norms, the communal norms, and even one's familial norms to discover who you are meant to be, what you are meant to contribute, and where the truth lies. His beautiful description of this breakthrough approach went like this. If we had lived in the second millennium before the Common Era, the millennium of Abraham, and could have canvassed all the nations of the earth, what would they have said of Abraham's journey? In most of Africa and Europe, where prehistoric animism was the norm, and artists were still carving and painting on stone the heavenly symbols of the great wheel of life and death, they would have laughed at Abraham's madness, pointed to the heavens where the life of earth had been plotted from all eternity. A man cannot escape their fate. The Egyptians would have shaken their heads in disbelief. The early Greeks might have told Abraham the story of Prometheus. Do not overreach, they would advise. Come to resignation. In India, he would be told that time is black, irrational, and merciless. Do not set yourself the task of accomplishing something in time which is only the dominion of suffering. In China, the now anonymous sages, whose thoughts would eventually influence the I Ching, would caution that there is no purpose in journeys or in any kind of earthly striving on every continent, in every society. Abraham would have been given the same advice that wise men, as diverse as Lao Tzu and Siddhartha, would one day give their followers. Do not journey, but sit. Compose yourself by the river of life. Meditate on its ceaseless and meaningless flow. I have always loved that paragraph because in a world with a fatalistic approach, we Jews brought the principle of self-searching and of the shaping of our own destinies into sharp relief. And that can be rather threatening to those who are less inclined to accept personal responsibility for both them and their futures. In fact, I believe that the spiritual and philosophical demands of the Jewish way have contributed not only to our many contributions to society at large, but also to the way we are feared and viewed with suspicion, because at the very root of Jewish life is the obligation to search deeply for truth and to align oneself with an operating system that values analysis and activism. We are not commanded to believe in God. We are told to know God. So not the blind faith for us, but rather the pursuit of truth, which is ultimately knowable. In every generation and in every ism, you will see a Jew standing with the downtrodden or the persecuted. Sometimes we've even attached ourselves to isms that were not quite right. According to the writer Eddie Portnoy, the number of isms to which Jews attached themselves during the first decade of the 20th century was quite remarkable. Bundism, communism, Yiddishism, Zionism, diaspora nationalism, socialism, trade unionism, and territorialism. The point is that searching for truth and looking for operating systems that bring one closest to the living of that truth is in our spiritual DNA. Think Abraham and monotheism, Trotsky and communism, Gloria Steinem and feminism. I think the only thing more tragic than choosing the wrong ism is failing to search for one in the first place. A life without a search for truth is one that stays stunted in size when its potential for expansion is endless. So, stop worrying about all the new identities and isms that your kids seem to cycle through. Better that they search than they stagnate. Just stay steadfast in the values you've imparted to them and model the consistency and hopefully the happy life you are leading because of those values. This week, can we challenge ourselves to take the Lech Lecha challenge, to go to yourself challenge? Spend an hour examining what you believe, what you attach yourself to, and just ask yourself why. Ask yourself if you can still articulate why you believe what you believe. And if you can't, take some time to research and explore how you came to hold on to the isms you hold on to, and be open to evolving. Yisrael Chai.
Thanks for listening to Rise and Shine. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Momentum Podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join Adrienne again next time for more timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations that fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note.
This podcast was sponsored by the Zeidelman Family Foundation. Spread the wisdom. Inspire Jewish individuals around the globe by supporting Momentum's podcasts. To sponsor, contact podcast@momentumunlimited.org. You're listening to a Momentum podcast. For unlimited inspiration, wisdom, and empowerment, visit momentumunlimited.org.